Welcome back, brothers and sisters. I am Braden. This is Langley Outdoors Academy, the place where we not only talk about what's going on in the gun world, but also how we're going to fix it together. And the content that we're going to talk about today is something that is really concerning, to be quite honest. A cardinal out of Newark has put forward some pretty concerning statements around the Second Amendment, but that's not the whole scope that's extremely concerning. There's also an emphasis on, quote, the obsessive nature of individualism and individual rights in the United States. This is one you're going to want to see and send out. Everything will be linked in the description box below, and please leave some comments in the comments field because I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And of course, we would love for you guys to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you turn the notification bell on. We have freedom to dispense on the daily, and we would love to have you with us. But with that said, thank you for your consideration. Let's dive in. I'm really curious to your thoughts because, like I said in the introduction, this is bigger in scope than just the Second Amendment. Yes, it's an affront to the Second Amendment, but this goes back to our actual founding documents and our Constitution and our individual obsession. That's the whole point. We'll get to that in 1 second. But here's the article. Of course, it's linked in the description. Newark Cardinal urges faithful to forego the Second Amendment rights. Okay, what's that about? Let me show you. Newark Cardinal Joseph Tobin has launched an appeal to Catholics to voluntarily forego their Second Amendment rights by refusing to bear arms. So, that's pretty straightforward. It is what it is. He's got his opinion. He's dispersing it to his Catholic population. That's his thing. Here's the thing that I want to address. When you advise a population to forego Second Amendment rights, you're doing so at the behest of a greater collective good, or at least what they've said is a greater collective good. That's the entire impetus behind this announcement, if you will. Now, this cardinal has a history and a propensity to be on the leftward side of the aisle. Fine, cool. Again, your choice. But when you start impacting others around their rights, that's where it gets concerning. Now, we're going to hit the Second Amendment thing in a second. But I want to show you something out of order, and this speaks to something that is much broader, as I mentioned. The voluntary self-restraint that I am calling for, quote, will not solve the problem of gun violence all by itself, but it can help us change our culture from one that is obsessively focused on individuals' rights to a society dedicated to ensuring the common good, he writes. We are going to set up camp on that for a second. A culture that is obsessively focused on individual rights. Let's hit that one first. The entire principle of our founding documents, the founding of our country, and the protection of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights was to protect the individual from an overbearing tyrannical government. The entire point is the individual rights are preserved so that the government cannot trample them without due process. That's where we get the whole problem with red flag laws. Again, all of this is interwoven and tied together. There is nothing that is on an island in this. But again, sticking to the concern about obsessively concerned about individual rights, yeah, that's the entire point. And for you to say, forego all of those obsessive needs for individual rights for a greater common good, that is very similar to some other things that we've heard in Europe. And organizations and governments, not just governments, some organizations, you guys infer what you will on that one, also have a propensity to trample the individual's rights for the common good. You got to break a few eggs to make an omelet is a good example of something that is pretty common tongue in the United States language, or the English language in the United States. The whole point here is you are officially hearing through the outlet of the Second Amendment and foregoing your Second Amendment rights, you are openly hearing a Catholic leader say to his flock, if you will, or his parish, or all of his constituency, however you want to call it. I'm not Catholic, so however you do it. But my whole point here is you've got something that they're saying go after the collective versus the individual rights. The collective is socialism. The collective is communism. Forego your individual rights for a safety in a common net that entire society will dictate what is good for all, not for the individual. These are dangerous concepts that have proven and led to millions of dead over the past 20th century alone. Let's continue. Like I said, we got to set up camp on that, but let me show you what he actually said around the Second Amendment. Quote, it's true that we have a Second Amendment right to bear arms, but rights always involve responsibilities. In this case, the responsibility to protect the innocent and to secure public safety and good order. So this is something that I find very fascinating with anybody who's on the gun control side of the argument. It's always like, well, gun ownership comes with responsibility. No kidding. Every single gun owner out there goes through the basic safety course of either the NRA or the GOA or USCCA, or just basic passed down knowledge in a gun range. You go through safety courses, and the first thing that you're taught is responsibility. It's about responsibility. It's not about wild ad hoc on your hip cowboy action. It's about responsibility and bearing that responsibility because it's a birthright. That's an important piece. But anyway, let's continue. The Cardinal declares in a recent pastoral letter, quote, "The mass shootings we are witnessing almost weekly now are a grave threat to the lives and well-being of all people. Of course, it's a threat to the well-being and lives of all people, but that doesn't mean that you infringe upon the obsessively individual rights in order for a collective good of which the government has all the centralized power. You have no way to stand up to these organizations. They will absolutely, without question, without fail, and proven through history, trample the rights of the individual for the collective good. This has never not happened in an autocratic government. Ever." I continue. One last thing. In what he calls his, quote, "most challenging and controversial proposal," Tobin urges voluntary self-restraint involving the waiving of the right to purchase and own firearms. You're an individual. You can make that choice. You want to buy a gun, you want to buy a gun. Cool. If you don't, you don't. But the idea that this person is speaking from a position of power around obsessively individual rights versus the common good is the really, really concerning part. Now, of course, as the Second Amendment angle, that's not cool either. It is ultimately boiled down to a choice. But the thing about individual rights versus common good really got me. Anyway, let's continue. Quote, "Let's voluntarily set aside our rights in order to witness the truth that only peace and never violence is the way to build a free society that is lived concretely in our homes, our neighborhoods, our communities, our nation, and our world," he writes. The whole point here is there are criminals out there. Do you think that the criminals are just going to go, you know what, you're right, we should just give these things up because I'm clearly not following the confines of the Catholic Church. I'm clearly not doing any of the things that are within the rules and regulations of the Catholic Church, much less society as a whole. So you're right, I'm going to forego my Second Amendment rights and make it an equal playing field for my criminal behaviors and activities. It doesn't make sense on any level. Now, I'm being more gentle and soft-gloved on this one because, of course, there's different elements here that I need to be sensitive around. But the whole point here is, this is concerning. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I will see you on the next one. I'm Braden. See you later.